Hey guys, and welcome to the Lower Chesapeake Bay Fishing Report, the first podcast to bring you the local offshore, nearshore, and inshore fishing report, whether it's good, bad, or ugly. We got a great fishing report lined up for you guys this week, but first let's hear who's making the show possible. GreatDaysOutdoors.com. Great Days Outdoors has been the premier destination for hunters and anglers looking for a comprehensive look into the outdoor lifestyle since 1997. Our stories are crafted by dedicated journalists who live, eat, and breathe all things hunting, fishing, conservation, and land ownership. Check them out at GreatDaysOutdoors.com. Listen up, folks. AFTCO has a new promotion for all Great Days Outdoors Podcast Network listeners. They're now offering a camo sunglasses cleaner cloth with any purchase of AFTCO products. I especially enjoy their hooded sun protection shirts, as well as their Seiko fluorocarbon. All you got to do to get your coupon code is text LCBFR to 779-345-2918. Again, just text the letters LCBFR to 779-345-2918 to get subscribed to our email list, and we'll send you the promo code via email. All right, guys, well, welcome back to the show. Today, we're going to be talking to Captain Jake Bolts aboard the Flying Fish charters for our offshore report. How we doing, Captain Jake?
I'm doing great. How about yourself?
Hey, not too bad, man. Got any fish stories for us?
Well, the first real fishing trip of the year for me was last Thursday out of Oregon Inlet, North Carolina. Went on my buddy's center console. And, the most exciting part of the day actually was leaving the dock. When we were leaving the dock, there was thick fog all the way from the dock all the way to about 3 miles outside the Oregon Inlet Bridge. You could hardly see past the bow. So that was a very exciting first hour trying to navigate down there. And then it cleared up about 3 miles outside the bridge. And then when we got to the fishing grounds, it kind of came back in nice and thick. So when the fleet got out there, it was a little bit of a mess for a while. Fishing was on the slow side. The water that was holding the tunas had moved out and found some cold green water. It was only about 58 degrees. We ended up catching one yellowfin and a couple black fins. And we ended up running way south looking for the warm water, and we found it and worked an edge and ended up catching a couple of little dolphins. But for the most part, pretty slow day, but slick, calm, beautiful day. Can't complain too much, but nice way to get the year going.
Yeah, it sounds like it. I mean, and that's part of the show. We talk about it whether it's good, bad, or ugly. So it sounds like it's somewhere between good and ugly-ish, but not bad.
Yeah, any day you catch a couple of fish, it's definitely better than going home empty-handed.
Yeah, that's for sure. How big was that tuna you guys caught?
It was a small one. It was 25, 30 pounds. There was a couple of nice yellowfins caught that day by the fleet, 80, 90 pounds. But
oh, wow.
Yeah, we just weren't lucky enough to get that bite.
And you talked about going south until you found the warm water. I'm more of a nearshore guy myself, chasing Cobia and Reds. But when you're offshore and you're looking for that warm water, what are some of those things that you really look for to try to, go from looking at a bunch of water to a little bit of water to try to hone in on a bite?
Well, first of all, that boat was equipped with Starlink, so we were able to actually look at the up-to-date water, forecast shot with the sea surface temperatures and kind of find out exactly where the change was. We just kind of picked up and started running to the southeast. And down there, it's really easy to tell for the most part because you're fishing the Gulf Stream change. Mm-hmm. And the inside water is cold green water, especially this time of year. And on the outside, it's this, just beautiful blue, warmer water. And there's normally like foam or grass on an edge of a line that kind of stacks up. And you cross that line in your bottom machine, temp goes up 5-6 degrees, sometimes 10 degrees in one shot. And that's where the dolphins hold under all that stuff on that line. Unfortunately for us, it wasn't holding that much, but yeah, it's pretty easy to tell down there that the watercolor and that foam and stuff really gives it away.
You mentioned Starlink and using that to look at some satellite images for those temperature breaks. Is there a specific website that you like to go to or app that you use for that?
I use Rip Charts, which is a paid subscription. And then there's also Rutgers, the college, I think is what it is. They have their own SST thing, which is free, but you can't do any overlays on it. With the Rip Charts app, you can do overlays so you can, find coordinates and, do your distance from the inlet and kind of give you an idea of how far you got to go and kind of exactly where you need to go compared to the Rutgers shot where you can kind of see a general, area. But the rip chart's a lot easier to find a specific place you want to fish.
That's really cool. It's very much more complicated than fishing in the bay. Sounds like a
Yeah,
scientific
there's
process.
yeah, the fishing offshore is based a lot on where the good water is at for the most part. But then, some days the tunas will be there in the cold, ugly water where you don't expect them to be. But most times you're looking for good water.
Very cool. So tell us a little bit about, you mentioned you went out on a friend's center console, but I know you guys fish primarily out of Rudy Inlet, the flying fish, sport fishing charters. Tell us a little bit about the boat that you guys run and what types of trips that you guys offer and what your specialization is.
Yeah, it's a 43 Cabo fly bridge. So we have the salon with the inside air conditioning, couches, TVs, a little kitchen area, a couple fridges, two bathrooms, little master bedroom down to the right, and bunks up in the front. So they really make good use of the space for being a 43-foot boat. And obviously, I drive from up top on the bridge. We do all sorts of fishing from all the way from inshore, right outside the inlet, all the way to 80 miles offshore, doing the tuna fishing thing.
Mm-hmm.
So we do 4-hour inshore trips, primarily targeting mackerels, bluefish, drum, cobia if you're lucky, and then the next step up would be like a 6-hour, which is all that, and then spade fish when they're biting, and then a lot of times if the drum and the cobia are around, we'll spend more time doing that, and then we offer an 8-hour trip, which is our wreck fishing trip, which seems to be probably our most popular trip. People love doing that. Sea bass, flounder, and we'll do some spade fishing out there too. It's a lot of fun. You fill the box up, everyone goes home with a ton of meat. And then, we have the 12-hour offshore trip, which is tuna, dolphin, wahoo, marlin, all that kind of stuff. And then we bottom fish out there too for tilefish and groupers and stuff like that.
Very cool. I know earlier in the week when we were chatting, you mentioned, you're captaining the boat, running the trips. But your father's also involved with you, and you're mentioning like some of his favorite things to go fish for. I'm curious about you. You've been doing this a long time. If it's dealer's choice, what are you going fishing for?
I'd have to say I'm going marlin fishing. I love tuna fishing. It's a very close, second, but there's nothing that gets my blood pumping like the marlin fishing. Seeing one back there, and what it is for me is I feel like there's more skill involved to it. Raising them up and then being able to switch them off with teaser, just, the aspect of being able to hook them, it takes a lot more skill than just, trolling around for tunas. And that's what I really enjoy is the skill and the difficulty aspect of it.
Said raising them up. What does that mean?
So, in a perfect world, what we do is we fish 2 teasers and 2 dredges, which are used to just kind of raise a fish or bring it into your spread. And then luckily, if all goes right, it goes to one of those things first, and you're able to pull it away from them, and then switch a bait, with a hook to it. And that's, like I said, a dream scenario. But you use those teasers and the dredges to, just attract them into your spread.
That's awesome. It reminds me of a time. I've only been offshore a few times myself, but one of the times that I was offshore, we were down in South Alabama, about 120 miles offshore, and we were tuna chunking. And, you said that's one of the most exciting things you love to go after. I can understand that because we did, 2 days of tuna fishing and mahi fishing. And then we had one blue marlin experience where we were sitting there looking down, tuna chunking, and all of a sudden this, like 25-pound mahi swims out. And right behind it is this like 300-pound blue marlin with its pec fins all lit up, absolutely beautiful scenario. And then next thing you know, all hell breaks loose as we're scrambling to get, a bait ready and get it in the water. And I actually had my GoPro in the water at this point, and we have it on film where the marlin actually takes the bait, and we all just lose it. Just the excitement goes through the roof. It'd be like the equivalent of landing a 120-pound cobia in my mind. And then you can see it on the camera. The marlin swims away, and as it goes to remouth the bait and like attempt to swallow it, the bait just disappears and pulls away from its mouth. And we're all like so confused, what's going on? And didn't realize that we had tied the bait onto a line that had a bird in line. So the drag of the bird pulled the bait right out of its mouth, and then the marlin was gone forever. But that little moment of excitement was like none other. So I totally get what you're saying in terms of if you had a choice, you'd go marlin fishing.
You kind of got to do everything almost perfect when it comes to marlin fishing. And a lot of times they don't give you a second chance. And like I said, just, that difficulty gets me fired up.
Yeah.
Gets the blood pumping.
So there's what, blue marlin? What species of marlins do we see around here?
So it's primarily white marlin and blue marlin, and then last year we actually had a really good run of sailfish. I'm hoping that comes back this summer. That would be really cool if they kept coming back in numbers like they did last summer. We'd see them every now and again, but nothing like the numbers we had last summer.
Yeah, last summer, is it true somebody saw a white marlin in the Chesapeake Bay, like inside the
Yeah,
bay?
it is on the west side of the bridge. I saw the video and was able to confirm it, and yeah, that's one of the wildest things I've ever seen.
I mean, how does something
But
like that happen?
I don't know. I mean, there's no fences or gates out there, so I guess they can swim wherever they want to go.
Well said. No fences or gates. That's so true. Captain Jake, you guys do, the marlin fishing, the wreck fishing. When you're out there tuna fishing, what's your typical strategy for our waters here?
Almost every day, I'm going to be trolling about a 10 rod spread. I think is what we're up to now. We used to do a lot of chunking like 10 years ago, 15 years ago, but that kind of faded off. And now that's kind of a northern thing. So most of the time we're just trolling. We pull a couple of squid chains, a couple of sea witches. I pull a spreader, one or two spreader bars every day. I like pulling teasers, tuna fishing. A lot of people don't, but that's the thing I do. Anything that gets a lot of splash going, I like. And like I said, 10 rods. So more rods you have out there, more chances you have. And when you're tuna fishing, some days you only have a couple chances. And when you run over the right school of them, you want to have as many rods in the water as possible. Because I mean, you run over the right school, you might get 10 bites, and that
Sure.
might be your one good whack of them for the day.
Mm.
And you want to have as many chances as you can. I've had days where I've only had like two groups of bites, but having that many rods out, I was able to catch 6 or 7 out of both groups of bites, and made for a good day. That would have been a slow day had you not had so many poles in the water.
Makes sense. Got to have the lines in the water and increase your odds accordingly. So thanks for that.
Controlled chaos.
Yeah. I mean, I can't imagine 10 poles going down at the same time. And you guys are what, a 6-pack total?
Yep, that's right. And so I fished 4 from up in the bridge with me, and so yeah, there's 6 down there at least fishing on most days, and if they all have fish on them, I'm just kind of sitting there driving and trying to take turns on a reel, trying to keep it tight upstairs, and just hope everything works out.
That's a special kind of chaos right there, man.
Yeah, it's what you live for right there.
Not to mention all the potential for terminal tackle loss. I just got my first little taste of the tuna fishing with this bluefin run that happened back in December of 23. And my buddies were like, "Yeah, run by Ocean's East and grab a couple of Joe Shoots." And I'm like, "Okay," not having a clue what this stuff cost. I walked in and I grabbed 3 Joe Shoots, and I had to take a second mortgage out of my house just to check out. I couldn't believe the prices of this stuff. So I'm like, when you look at the cost of an offshore trip, it's all relative to, the inventory and things you guys are having to keep up with to be successful when you go out there and run 10 rods. I mean, how much does 10 rods cost? Probably what? 20 grand, 30 grand?
Yeah, something like that. We just got a brand new set of custom rods built for the boat, so yeah, I can tell you it's pretty pricey.
You
But
said some custom
you gotta
rods.
keep your stuff up.
Yeah, you want to give a shout out? Who built your rods?
Richard Wazen, real blessed.
Yeah.
Custom rods, man. He makes an awesome rod. He did all of our tuna poles and all of our white marlin poles. So yeah, he builds all our stuff now. Does a great job.
Very cool. Yeah, I've seen his stuff online and on the socials. So
Yeah, ready to put them to use. Sitting around itching.
so Captain Jake, folks that are listening, not everybody has a boat that can go 80 miles offshore. So if we want to get on board the Flying Fish and get offshore with you guys, what's going to be the best way that we can get in touch with you and book a trip?
I tell a lot of people to call me. My number is 757-769-9545. I like to talk to everyone and just make sure, I get the right trip for them, because some people have, something in mind, and then I talk to them, and what's actually best for them is completely different. We have a Facebook page, Instagram page, and we have a great website, just flyingfishsportfishing.com.
How do we spell that?
FLYN fish sportfishing.com.
Perfect. So Instagram, Facebook, call you.
Yeah, and like I said, I like for people to look at the website and kind of get an idea. I have a breakdown of all my trips, so people can read, all about the different trips, and then they can call me and like I said, hopefully they have an idea by that time. But if they don't, I can kind of lead them in the right direction.
That makes sense. And then, of course, as the season unfolds, week by week, we're going to see different things getting caught. So that's going to kind of hone in on what type of trip's going to make sense in the
Oh
near
yeah,
near
the
future.
seasons definitely. I only offer certain trips certain times of the year. June through like September, I basically offer everything that I have on my website. But other times of the years, it's more specific.
Very cool. And quick, record story, shall we say? You mentioned chasing the marlins. What's the biggest marlin you've ever caught on that boat?
Uh, I think the one we caught last year is probably this will be our fourth summer with this boat, and we caught about a 450, 500 pounder last year on a tuna trip in the middle of catching tunas. It was pretty awesome, and I had a good buddy that I grew up with. It was his group that did it, so it was pretty special.
That's awesome. How long does it take to land something like that? 400, 500 pound animal.
Well, with those models, we don't bring them in the boat or anything. So, as soon as we get the release, we like to let them go just so they have a better chance of survival. I think we caught that one in 30 or 45 minutes. We had them on the right pole. We had them on an 80 wide.
Mm.
Normally it doesn't happen like that. And they, tend to bite the smallest rod in the spread, but yeah, we got that one on the right thing. So didn't take us too long, and we got to let it go and go back to tuna fishing.
That's cool, man. I love a good fish story. Gets my blood pumping. Here it is, early May. It's just getting started. I can't wait for some more stories to come and hearing some more good reports from you on the flying fish. So, folks, that's going to wrap up this offshore segment. We're going to take a quick break. Y'all stick around. Hilton's offshore charts. The days of heading out and blindly looking for good fishing areas are pretty much over. Don't waste time and money on fuel searching for fish. You need the most recent, highest resolution images to not only know where to go, but where not to go. The knowledge provided by today's technology is critical when planning an offshore fishing trip. So make the choice that professional captains all over the East Coast make and choose Hilton's Real-Time Navigator. The easy-to-use interface and excellent customer service will have you on the fish every time you go. Check them out at hiltonsoffshore.com. That's hiltonsoffshore.com. All right, guys, let's jump into another report here. I am talking to our good friend, Captain Austin Hayne with Fineo Sport Fishing. Captain Austin, welcome to the show. How you doing?
What's up, man? Doing good. How you doing?
Oh, man, I can't complain. I mean, it's just started to get a little warm, a little bit of south wind. I think a few folks have been able to sneak out and do a little bit of shakedown trips for these Cobias and Reds. Yeah,
Yep.
excited to dig in and talk to you a little bit. Before we get started talking fishing, I was looking at your, Fineo Sport Fishing, and I know Fineo stands for something. For those on the show that have never met you before or dug into it, what does that stand for?
Well, so it kind of goes with Finn and Fineo. I mean, like, let me take a step back. It's kind of a joke because my dad came up with Fineo, and he had this brilliant idea that it has Finn in it and Fineo, and failure is not an option is what it stands for, and it has Finn. So he thought it was this genius idea to add them together. So
I like it.
but whatever, it works.
Failure is not an option. Now, was that some sort of like all right, son, you want to go into fishing instead of becoming an attorney or a doctor? Failure's not an option?
Pretty much, yeah. When I was younger, he always knew I loved fishing so much, and my whole family, they've always done the self-employed thing and had a passion for stuff, and he knew that if I got to something that I actually liked, then in my family nobody fished, so it was pretty much failure is not an option if you're going to get into this instead of going to the family business with them. So
That's cool. And how many years now have you been operating a charter business?
Since 2012, that was my first year.
Wow. So 12 years. So I guess time would say you have not failed.
No, I've been pretty lucky. Between Virginia and Florida, I've gotten to live the good life so far. So
That's cool, man. And I know through the years you've fished several different boats. What kind of boat are you running now for this, lower Chesapeake Bay area?
currently running a 24-foot Pathfinder center console.
And is that outfitted? You've got a tower up top for visibility?
Yeah, I've got a tower on it. It's got a big casting platform on it. Has a spot lock, which is nice if you're doing any kind of bottom fishing or, anything where you kind of need to slow the boat down. But yeah, the tower is crucial in the bay. So it's got a big tower on it, really stable boat, 250 Yamaha on there. So we can get around pretty quick. And it's really good on fuel economy because it actually doesn't draft as much. So I really do like that boat a lot.
That makes sense, especially with the way the gas prices have been lately. Any sort of efficiency gained out on the water is critical. So, question for you: when you're out there, fishing in the Chesapeake Bay, the premise of this show is that we're going to talk about things, whether it's good, bad, or ugly. We chatted the other day, and you were doing a little bit of, kind of nearshore, inshore fishing, targeting some blues and some rockfish. Tell me a little bit about what you saw and what happened with that.
Well, we've had good nights and bad nights. We've done it. The first night we went, I just got my boat out of the shop and I kind of need to go test drive it. So we used to catch a lot of stripers in the springtime around here, and went out and we had an excellent night. We hooked quite a few. We did lose a lot. We physically boated probably 8, between 28 and 35 inches. So nice class of stripers, mixed with some like 8-10 pound blues. Fantastic night. Had a blast. Thought it was going to be the best spring ever. So go in, call a couple friends up, like, hey, y'all want to hop on? I found some good fishing. Go out the very next night. What do you think happened? Went out there and caught 1 bluefish overnight. Nothing changed. No wind direction changed. No tide change. No temperature change. It was like fantastic. The very next night, 1 bluefish. So been very inconsistent with that, but at least we had 1 good night at it.
Comparing those 2 nights, any indication of what the difference was between, basically a almost skunk and then, landing 8 nice fish?
That's what was so weird, was really nothing changed. We hit it at the exact time. I even brought out live baits the next night, thinking we could do even better than the previous night. But I do believe it's just my suspicion, because I have had weird nights in the spring like that. I think these are the fish, the stripers that go up in the rivers and then they're pushing out to go migrate wherever they go after they lay their eggs. And I think you're getting the different migrations of the striped bass coming through. So you could have them there for 3-4 nights. And then the next wave, that wave goes on, and then you got to wait on the next wave to come out. So every night out there seems to be just a little bit different. But like I said, some nights you'll get 2-3 nights in a row of good fishing, then 1 night's bad, or 2 nights are bad, or 3 nights are bad. And then it comes back to being excellent again. So I think it's just different waves of fish coming out of the bay.
And when you're targeting those fish, is there a specific tide that you prefer or time of day?
Yeah. You strong believer in nighttime fishing for stripers. I know you can catch a few in the daytime, but it's like a 10-to-1 ratio.
Mm-hmm.
As for tides, it's got to be moving. Stripers do not like slow water. So if that tide is ripping, that's perfect. And my preferred tide is usually an outgoing. I believe the outgoing tide in the springtime is crucial for a lot of fish, because you get the warmer water. You get that incoming tide. Temperatures can go from 65 to even 60 some nights. It drops dramatically. The outgoing tide with the warmer water definitely, in my opinion, is better if you can do that.
That makes a lot of sense.
More important than anything is incoming, outgoing. It has to be moving. You have to time that tide correctly. If you get out there and it's slack tide and you fish that whole hour, you're not going to have a bite most likely. And a lot of times we just go out there and just hang out on the boat for an hour if the tide's not moving away for it to switch.
And I know the striper season is what, federally regulated in terms of the size and different times of the year. Where do we fall in that right now? Is this just, purely fun catch and release, or are we able to harvest it all?
Yeah, it's all catch and release right now. I think the season opens up May 15th, I do believe. I'm not 100% on that.
Mm-hmm.
I personally don't keep stripers because the bay's had a huge decline of striped bass over the last few years. So my heart won't let me harvest one. So I do all catch and release. Even when I'm live baiting them, I use all circle hooks to make sure that, they get released correctly. But yeah, I think opening season is like May 15th to sometime mid-June. And honestly, once it hits May 15th, the striper bite's pretty much very slow, because you really can't get past the bluefish, even if you wanted to catch them. And there's other things out there like drum and cobias that, that takes up the priority over all the fishing.
Yeah, absolutely. 2 things I want to dive into a little bit deeper is, kind of what you mentioned is some sustainability practices, and then also just kind of your setup for targeting them. But first, the sustainability, I think that's really important what you said, observing that there's been a decline, and then, intentionally doing purely, catch and release. That's one of the premises of this show, is to, talk about sustainable practices. So how long ago did you start, doing purely catch and release for these stripers?
So if I take a charter, obviously if they want to keep them, they're keeping them.
Mm-hmm.
But personally, I stopped keeping them probably around 2016, because 2012 was, I just started chartering, but I can still remember 2012, it was nothing. You could go out there and catch hundreds of them if you wanted, all different sizes, big, small, it didn't matter. You could wear them out. And then it just slowly kept getting worse and worse to the point of like, you were almost nervous to go out there, like, oh, am I going to catch them tonight? Kind of like I was talking about the other night, like they're gone some nights, they're there some nights. And ever since that decline, right around 2016, I'd say, where it was like just a huge drop off, I just stopped really keeping them and switched over to circle hooks and, keep them in the net. So you're ready for the picture, pull them in the boat, get your picture, and make sure he swims off good. So that's probably 2016 is when I really started thinking about that.
That's cool. And I think it's admirable too, as more folks do that, the average recreational fisherman, if everybody kind of takes on a similar mindset, I think it would be cool to see in, maybe a couple of years that population does, surge back if we show it the respect it deserves. And then when you're targeting them, what kind of setup are we using in terms of like rod, reel, lure, line?
For casting, which is you can catch them trolling, and there's a million different ways to catch rockfish. They're really popular. I personally like to catch them on lures, which is casting rods. And I'm usually using anywhere from a 4,000 to a 4,500, 5,000, like a little bit lighter than heavy. I'd call it like a medium setup.
Mm-hmm.
A medium rod as well, probably 7.6. I'm usually throwing 30-pound braid. And when you're night fishing, make sure you have that high vis green, high vis yellow, something bright, because when you get 2 or 3 people casting and there's fish hooked up, it can be disastrous with that dark line. Also, I do run fluorocarbon. You don't really need it. I usually run about 50, 60-pound fluorocarbon. I believe it has a little bit more abrasion resistance than actual monofilament. It is a little bit more expensive, but that's just what I use. And I'm typically throwing plugs, like bombers, stuff that doesn't really dive too deep. Usually a bomber swims about 6 inches down, because I'm usually fishing like rock piles and stuff like that. So you don't want your lure to dive too deep. And at sunset, right before dark, you can throw topwaters for them, which is my favorite way to catch them.
I'm sure that's fun to watch a big old, 35, 40-inch striper blow up on a topwater plug.
There's nothing better than a topwater bite for any fish on this planet. Topwater's where it's at.
All right, guys, that was a great report. We got more to come with Captain Austin Hayne, but first, let's take a quick break and check out this week's sponsors. Killer Dock. Most fishermen clean their fish on something like an unsightly old wooden table or the top of a cooler, somewhere that is not comfortable, not sanitary, and not attractive. Killer Dock makes the greatest fish cleaning station known to mankind. They are built from marine-grade aluminum and are corrosion-resistant clear-coated to protect it from the harsh salt environment. Killer Dock makes tables and canopies at several different sizes. So whatever you need on your dock, deck, or patio, they have a fish cleaning station for you. Check out killerdock.com to see more. Switching gears into, you had that really great night, a not so great night. Then all of a sudden our weather system kind of shifted and we had a couple of indications there was going to be some calm water and some sunshine. What'd you do?
Well, if you get a south wind in May, it's pretty early still, believe it or not. May my first sight casting trip was May 8th, and it was early in the season, but like you said, we had this weird pattern, which last year we did not have any May fishing at all. If you get a bunch of north winds in May, it's terrible. But we had south wind, calm seas, south wind, hot. It was like 80 degrees and sunny skies, just warming that water up. And I was just kind of wanted to test drive the boat, getting it broken in for the season. So I was like, well, what's going to hurt to go sight cast? So went out there and rode around the ocean front, left at probably 11:30, and I don't know, 20 minutes, came across thousands and thousands of redfish already in the bay, thousands of them. So it was really good for the first trip out to see redfish, a couple cobias. But yeah, that warm weather definitely does something to them. It goes to show you that it's not necessarily a time frame thing, because it's usually right around like May 15th, May 20th, or when the first fish are caught. But as long as you have that warm weather, I guess they push in even earlier.
I've heard it on another podcast assimilated down in the Alabama area, and they always say, fish don't have calendars.
Yeah, my brain does though. You start doubting everything. Like, there's no way this is going to be possible. And then sure enough, the patterns don't lie. Those fish want to be in that right temperature, and they just are going to move when they want to move. And we timed it right.
So you said you saw some cobias. Did you catch some too?
Yeah. So like I said, so we came out and I probably found the redfish right around noon. And, I was all excited for that. So I stayed on the red drum school for probably about an hour. You catch them every cast, catch them on top waters, bucktails, whatever. They were just eating. Had my wife with me, so she caught a couple. And then once her arms were tired of that, I was like, well, we caught enough redfish. Let's just at least let our arms break and go look around for maybe a magical cobia May 8th. I was like, still in my head, I'm like, that's just not possible.
Right.
Like every right out here, water temperature, clean water, everything, stingrays. And I was like, let's just go look. And so I'm just start driving south, just hanging out, nice day. And one single little cloud comes over and blocks all of our vision for maybe 45 seconds. And what do you think happens in that 45 seconds? Sure enough, the first cobias I see pop up right 5 feet off the boat and go right under the boat. And I'm like, number one, I'm mad at the cloud. But at the same time, I'm like, oh my God, I just saw a pair of cobias May 8th. So I'm like freaking out. So that's when I actually started circling that same area I saw those fish. Wasn't probably 15 minutes later, and I saw the biggest cobia I've seen in probably 2 years. It was big enough where I actually saw it, didn't say fish, cobia, anything. I saw it was just sitting there, and I was like, oh my God, what is that? Is that a turtle or is that a dolphin? It was because it was way out. And I said, dude, that's a cobia. So I drove over to it, and it was legit probably, I mean, it was 65 plus inches. It was a true monster. And since I wasn't, expecting to see cobias or anything, it was kind of just let's just go see what's out there. All I had was artificial lures. And so I throw out the bucktail, doesn't even acknowledge it, just sinks to the bottom of the ocean. But then we saw, of course I was upset about that. And then I did end up seeing a triple pack probably 20 minutes after that. And we got one out of that school that was 45 inches or so.
Nice.
Got him and then got a picture of him, let him go. But that is the earliest cobia I have ever seen / caught in Virginia, ever.
That's amazing.
And it was water. I was stoked.
Man, that gets me fired up because if it's starting this early in the season, we could potentially have a, absolute rock star cobia and red drum season this year in Virginia, which would be so cool.
Yeah, I'm hoping. I mean, like I said, last year, we had such a terrible start to the spring with the weather. And I do believe that's why last year was such a struggle, was the weather was just horrible for their migration in. And this year, it just seems to be everything is perfect, which is strange because, you look at the future forecast, you're like, oh, well, maybe we'll get one day next week if we're lucky and it's coming off the bad weather. But this year, it's just consistent, warm and south winds. You might get a north 1 or 2 days, but then the rest are back to nice again. So I think it's going to be, I really do.
Yeah, and I don't, I'm not a weatherman. I don't know how things work, but I know it was, I guess, an El Nino year or whatever it was that, helped push some of that water up that caused us to have that, unbelievable bluefin tuna bite back around Christmas time. So maybe that has something to do with, how we're getting this, blessing of great weather so early in the season. Austin, when you're out there chasing those red drum, those cobias, you mentioned some, artificial lures. We talked about the 7.6 medium 4,500 class reel that you like for those stripers. Setup wise, what are we using for cobias and red drum?
So this time of year, I'm usually using something that I can get more distance out of, because a lot of times these fish are going to be moving north, migrating the base. So they're kind of fast. So I'm actually going to be using usually about the same thing, about a 4,500 to a 5K. Anywhere from 30 to 40 pound braid. I don't want to, even though they're giant fish, any structure out there or anything like that. So I'm going to try to bump my stuff down as light as possible, usually 30, 40 pound braid, so I could really get a distance cast on them. And that's going to be on a 7.6 rod, 7-foot rod, something like that, medium heavy. And I'm really, like I said, I'm really going for distance because those red drum, they're pretty spooky. If you get too close to that school, they will sink and it can really ruin your day because you potentially could catch 100 fish or you could spook the school and not catch anything. So I'm pretty light line this time of year just to be able to cast, 50, 60 yards to be able to hit those schools. And again, I'm a strong believer in high vis braid, even in the daylight, because these red drum schools, you're going to hook multiple. You're not going to hook one. And when you have a bunch of customers with 4 drum on, if you've got a bunch of dark line out there, it can be a cluster and you can lose a bunch of fish that way. The leader I'm running is usually 60-pound fluorocarbon, but yesterday I was running 40 just to enhance my bites because, the fish were being a little bit finicky. As I said, those cobias weren't eating, so I bumped my leader size down. But normally I'm using 60-pound fluorocarbon, And again, they will eat monofilament, but there's no reason to even risk the cobias not eating, because cobias can be very, very hard to get to eat. So I spend the extra little bit of money on the fluorocarbon just to give me that extra edge. Mm-hmm. And as for lures, the most common lure I'm throwing is just a bucktail. A 2-ounce bucktail is great. And the colors on that don't really apply to the bites. They'll eat anything that's really moving, but my preference is a bright bucktail, pink, green, orange, something like that I can visibly see, because the fish, anything, but again, goes back to my vision, and I want to be able to track the lure in the water. So anything bright like that's going to be the ideal lure.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, you're kind of indicating that maybe the action of the lure, the way that you're working it through the water, might have a much more profound impact on getting a bite versus the color.
Correct. Yes. Yep. I've tried the dark bucktails and they eat them, but again, yeah, it's I lose track of them in the water, because so the way we're working a jig is you're going to cast past the fish, you're going to crank it on the surface, you're going to try to keep track of that bucktail, and once it gets in the fish's range, you're going to let it go down about 4 feet and yank it back up 4 feet, pops, just nice, like pops through the water. Mm-hmm. And for lure, you can't see when that lure's in front of the fish. You lose track of it going too deep. So the brighter lures, definitely you can track a lot better in the water columns and kind of feel out where it is in the depth.
That makes sense. And just kind of a quick aside, we were texting the other day about something, and how sometimes red drums are just so aggressive. Tell the listeners that story you told me about. You guys started playing around with trying different things just to see if they would eat.
Oh, yeah. So red drum, when you find them in a school, especially by yourself, if there's not a boat around and they've been just sitting out there on the surface, I like to film the crazy stuff. And, you could throw a lure out there, a pop or whatever, they're going to eat it. But we decided to get crazy with it. And I took my crock off and I put a J hook in the crock. And it is size 10 crock. I mean, surely he's not going to eat that thing. And tell you what, that was the hardest thing I've ever had to cast in my life. But I threw the crock out there with a J hook, and they were all over this thing. They don't care what it is, as long as it's moving. And they were just jumping out of the water. And I did hook them, and I pulled them off on the side of the boat.
Oh, come on. That's
but I've caught them on some water bottles. I've caught them on bare hooks before. But the crock was definitely the funniest thing I've ever gotten a bite on.
That is pretty funny. And, for the listeners out there that are considering, updating their tackle box with some foam size 10 shoes, what color was the crock?
It was blue, dark blue.
Okay. Blue Crocs. You heard it here. Blue Crocs, redfish will eat blue Crocs. Captain Austin, I want to hear one more quick fish story before we wrap up. You've been fishing these waters, you said, since 2012. What's the biggest cobia and biggest red drum you've ever caught or seen landed on your boat?
Biggest cobia I've ever caught was actually in May. Kind of a funny story about that one too, it was May 28th, I do believe. And we were on a charter, and we were right down there in Stanbridge, and we caught a ton of cobias already that day. I mean, we whacked them. And so my clients were like, they were still trying to understand the whole bucktail thing. I was trying to teach them how to do it and all this. And they were hooking a few here and there. And then we roll up to this school, and I stopped the boat, and I'm like, hey guys, there's a turtle over there with like 10 cobias on it. And my customers didn't have sunglasses, so it's already hard enough for them to see them, but you couldn't miss these things. And these things were just backs out of the water on top of this, what I called a turtle. And I said, just throw the bucktail in there, you'll hook one of them. So he throws the jig in there, and he's jigging it, and none of the fish are really moving. And I'm like, oh man, they're not going to eat. And so he actually stops cranking the bucktail, and probably 4 feet off the side of the boat, this turtle came to life and just sucked the bucktail in off the side of the boat, and completely soaked everybody in the boat. Started taking drag, and I said, oh my God, you got 100-pound cobia. Biggest fish we fight it, we get it in the net, we pull it in, and it was 66 inches long and 34-inch girth.
Lord.
And we let it go because if I remember right, it wasn't in season yet. There was a reason we let it go. And, but that was the biggest fish I've ever seen. I have no idea how big. I mean, if you do the fish calculator thing, it comes up to like 96 pounds or something like that. But
I
it was
think you're right on the head because in 2016, I've actually got one of the citations behind me. I caught a 56-inch cobia with it was like a 32, 33-inch girth, and it weighed 63 pounds. So at 60, what'd you say, 66 inches, 67 inches,
yeah,
and a
6 inches.
34-inch girth?
Yeah,
It could have
it
been
wasn't
well
a
over
long fish
100.
I ever caught, but it was one of those springtime big fish. Has not laid eggs. It was huge. It was scary big.
That
And
that is that sounds like an absolute just behemoth of a fish.
yeah, like I said, not the longest one I've ever caught, but that one had the biggest girth to it. It was a butterball at that big. It was just a disgustingly large fish. But
Mm.
it was just to watch him. When's the last time you could ever cast into a million small fish and somehow they don't move, and this giant, what I thought was a turtle, turns into the biggest fish you've ever seen, eats 4 feet off the side of the boat and soaks everybody on the boat. It
Yeah,
was it was awesome.
that's like winning the lottery the first time you ever buy a ticket. I mean, it just doesn't happen.
Correct.
Yeah. And then real quick, redfish, biggest redfish. I know they can vary in size and length and weight too, but just what's the biggest one you ever caught?
Biggest redfish, and it's actually it's not as good as a story. We caught it bottom fishing. May It was like May 15th ish, and it was so I usually nighttime fish for the reds,
Hmm.
and they're a lot active at night. But we had some disgusting weather this day, and so I was like, and the red drum love nasty weather when you're bottom fishing. It was foggy out, cold. It was just not a good day out there, and we're like, well, there's nothing else to do. Let's go try bottom fish for reds. And I had my old mate with me and one of my friends, and we put a half crab out there, hooked it, and I kept saying you have a giant ocean ray because we never could get this thing in. I thought it was like a 200-pound circle ray, and it comes in. I'm like, red drum, cool. Put it in the net. Still didn't realize how big it was. Our average redfish around here is probably 46, 48, 50 inches, somewhere in that range.
Hmm.
And we pull this thing in a boat, and my mate's trying to pull it over, and he's like, I can't get it. He's like, can you help me? I'm like, okay, sure. And so I grabbed the other side of that. We pull it in, we lay it in the bottom of the boat. And of course, I didn't measure it. That's the problem with this story is I didn't measure it or anything. I got a picture of it, but it was legit like 57 plus inches. It was disgustingly large. Again, it was one of those just abnormal, like you're like, look at that thing. Like, you catch a million redfish, and so you're kind of numb to them. But when you see
Hmm.
one that is like, look at that thing. That's all you can keep saying. But I did not get a size on it, and I still regret that to this day. I just, I usually get them in the net, take a picture, release them. But right after that, I took the picture and I sent it to a couple people, and of course, everyone's like, "Oh my God, how big was that?" And I'm like, I don't know, and everybody hates me for that. But that was biggest one I ever caught was definitely bottom fishing. It was big.
That's cool. I know coming up, we've got some good weather ahead too. Would love for the folks listening to know how to be able to get up with you and book a trip. When does your calendar open up? And if folks want to get up with you and get booked on Fineo Sport Fishing, what's the best way for them to get contact with you?
So our calendar opens up May 15th. We'll be doing sight casting charters till September 15th. And of course, a little bit after that, depending on the weather. But May 15th to September 15th, that's the prime time in this area for redfish, cobias. And the best way to get in contact with me is we have our website at www.finao, Finao, sportfishing.com. You can book on there. All the details are there. Our phone number is 757-530-4009. Or if you got any questions, you can always email us at info@finaosportfishing.com.
Awesome, Captain Hayne. We look forward to talking to you more as this season unfolds. And it's tough to hear that story about that, kind of frustrating night with only one bluefish, but man, it was exciting to hear about thousands of redfish and a couple cobias showing up on May the 8th here in Virginia Beach. So that's going to wrap up another great report with Captain Austin Hayne. Let's take one more break, and then we're going to talk about what we learned today and talk with a local expert on preseason boat maintenance and safety. Fish bites. Whether you're hitting the bay to catch bait fish using the traditional scent strips or fishing the rivers or marshes for speckled trout, red drum, and flounder, Fish Bites has something for you. Family owned and operated in St. Augustine, Florida, they pride themselves on making reliably consistent fishing products for anglers of all ages around the world. Fish Bites baits and lures are made with pride in the Sunshine State, USA. Check out the full line of scented saltwater and freshwater baits at fishbites.com. All right, guys. Well, let's jump on into the "What did we learn today" segment. First off, I gotta say, hearing these stories today and listening to the guys talk about what they're doing and seeing has got me so fired up to get out there and hopefully come tight on a cobia or a red drum soon. And I'm just praying for some more south winds to show up as we've had a little bit of a stretch of some cooler temps roll in and a little bit of rain, but hopefully that'll turn around soon. Thinking about what Captain Jake Bolts was saying, the way that they've invested in Starlink to have, real-time satellite chart updates, they're checking out the RIP charts, and then they're triangulating all that data to identify exactly the right sea surface temp and area that they want to go after in order to be successful. That's pretty sharp in terms of being able to, not waste any fuel or waste any time trying to get to the right place in order to get after their target species. So I definitely take that as a, good lesson learned. If I'm going to be out there offshore and I've spent all that money on a big expensive rig and expensive gear, why not go ahead and invest in some real-time updates by having that broadband connection? Or, if you're looking at getting a charter with them, you're going to be able to know that you're out there with the best available information, giving you the best chance to have a successful day. And then when we were talking to Austin specifically about, targeting those stripers, a couple things stood out to me. One was just kind of paying attention to the idea that, you need to go a few times. If you think you're skunked because you did something wrong, it could just be that you were in between maybe a wave of fish that was coming out of those rivers, that they go up into those rivers and tributaries to, spawn and lay their eggs, and then they come back out at different times. So perhaps if you go one time and you don't have a successful trip, don't give up, keep going. He also noted that nighttime seems to be the best time to be successful for stripers. He noted that, we wanted to really target a moving tide and specifically an outgoing tide. And it honestly slipped me when he was, talking about it, but now it makes sense. An outgoing tide coming from those, inshore tributaries will be carrying that warmer water. And he feels like that, definitely improves your chances of getting a bite as they seem to be a little bit more active in that slightly warmer water. And then for anybody that, is targeting them, that season is going to be May the 16th. That spring season will start May the 16th and run through June the 15th. And the size limit, it's actually fairly small. It's got to be greater than 19 inches and no more than 24 inches. And you can possess one per person. So like we talked about, though, our recommendation is to get your picture and then perform a safe release of that striper. And then switching gears to cobia, we talked a little bit about the importance of using a bright buck tail, about 2 ounces, and really to focus on the way that you animate that lure. That makes a much bigger difference than the lure itself. So, folks, that's going to wrap up what we learned today. Let's go ahead and shift gears. If you own a boat, this next discussion might be for you. Welcome back. We are going to talk a little bit about boat maintenance and safety tips, and I am joined by my friend Brad Herndon with Oyster Cove Boat Works. Welcome to the show, Brad. How we doing?
Good, man. Appreciate you having me. What's going on, y'all?
Man, we're just fired up. Fishing's right around the corner. But before we dive into maintenance and safety tips for the boaters out there, real quick, tell us what Oyster Cove Boat Works does.
So Oyster Cove Boat Works is a full-fledged boat dealership from sales and service and delivery, maintenance, anything under the sun that a boat dealership does. We do that we're based out of Gloucester, but we've got a nice new showroom and facility off Virginia Beach Boulevard down near the ocean front. And it's just an all-encompassing campus, and we're here for 110% of everybody's boating needs.
Awesome, man. So, season's right around the corner, but folks, got their boats on a trailer, on boat lift, whatever. They're going to get in the water here soon. As somebody who sees boats and come and go every single day, what are the most important maintenance and safety items that we should be thinking about before our big, first inaugural trip of the season?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing, the top 5 things that I check, especially when it comes to safety gear and, even on my own boat as I get it ready for the season, a lot of it has to do with U.S. Coast Guard safety equipment. And, that's something we provide our customers when you're buying a new boat from us. but you always want to check your flares, make sure your dates are good. I typically try to tell people that at least get them through the year or maybe, into the next year. And if not, then go ahead and just go buy a new set. Check your fishing licenses and the registrations for your boats. Make sure that the dates are correct, that you're in compliance. Check your horn, check your noisemaker, whistle, whatever you've got on the boat. And it's always good to have a backup like a bullhorn or a whistle. Check your fire extinguishers. Fire extinguishers not only show whether they're good, whether they're empty, or whether they're full, but also they have dates on them as well. And they need to be checked periodically. That's something that the Coast Guard will look at. One thing that I think sometimes gets often overlooked, especially on trailer boats or lift kept boats, on most transducers, they'll stay on even if you're on a lift and if you're on a trailer, if the unit or the batteries are on, especially if your unit, Garmin, Simrad, Raymarine. And so what I've always tried to educate folks is that, that transducer is kept cool by the water. So if it's on, if the screen's on and you're on a boat lift or you're on a trailer, it's got the opportunity to burn it up. And so what you want to do is go into your sonar screen, go into your options, and just click that transmit off button. That'll save some headaches down the road for sure.
Have you ever seen one of those actually burn up, like because it was left on?
We had one recently accidentally burn up at the shop. It's not that it fried and caught on fire, but it just made it to where it wasn't reading correctly. So
That's frustrating.
So it had to be replaced.
Yeah, easily avoided by just either make sure your transmit is off, or just simply make sure the unit itself is off before you get that boat out of the water.
Yeah, and I catch myself doing it on my boat all the time. If I've got it on maintenance or I'm checking something, I've got to remember to turn off that transmit button myself. So sometimes the biggest thing is remembering to turn it back on when you get to your fishing spot.
Why can't I see the fish? Turn it on. What are some other items that come to mind?
On the operation and the maintenance side of things, kind of the top 5 things that I look for. One is check your batteries, make sure that they're up, they've been charged over winter, or if they need to be replaced, put an actual voltmeter on them, check that they've got 12 volts plus. Check the connections on the batteries, check the connections on your switching for your batteries. Just make sure that everything's nice and tight, and that way you don't have any loss of voltage that way. We see that on new boats and used boats coming in for maintenance, that sometimes connections work their way loose, boats bounce in the ocean. It's not always flat like a lake when we go out there in the bay and in the saltwater environment. So definitely want to continually kind of check those connections every now and then. One big thing that I always want to check is check your bilge pumps and your float switches as well. Make sure that the pumps turn on. If you've got them on float switches, make sure that the float switches will work. Don't let a $35 float switch take out a however many thousands of dollar boat because it didn't work properly. One thing that I think some folks kind of forget sometimes, because we've gone to this 4-stroke world across the board with the engine manufacturers, is pop that cowling off and check the oil level like you would underneath the hood of your truck. Just make sure that it's where it needs to be. You can kind of do that once a month or at the beginning of every season. Obviously, that's something we'll check on an annual service as well. And, I always carry an extra fuel water separator. With the fuels nowadays, some marinas have non-ethanol, some still have ethanol. It's just always good to have a spare just in case. And then last but not least, kind of goes along with that is, pick your favorite fuel stabilizer, use that. I tend to use it no matter if it's ethanol or non-ethanol. I kind of like the Stabil products. I've just always had good luck with them, me personally.
Same.
And then, whatever motor you're running, whether it's Mercury, whether it's Yamaha, whether it's Suzuki, all of them have, special fuel additives. Yamaha's ring free. I think there's a Quicksilver one for the Mercury side. That's good to add every, maybe once a month to your fuel tanks, just to help clean out the carbon and stuff, the buildup in the motors. Just keeps them running clean. As far as any like grease points for most of that stuff on the motors, a lot of that stuff is done whenever somebody does an annual service with us, or if they're doing the service themselves. And a lot of that stuff is in the owner's manuals for the motors.
That brings up a good point because it can be easy to forget about those Zerk points. There's several of them, especially on an outboard motor. So whatever your outboard is, great advice. Go in the manual, find out what all the Zerk points are. You're probably going to have, steering, your center, gear shaft for shifting. I know under the cowling there's a Zerk point as well, and then your tilt trim Zerk. So make sure you get all of them because again, those are those simple little weird things that can really, cause headaches. And then I'll add one too, which I experience almost annually. Granted, I've got an older boat, but almost annually, I've got to top off my steering fluid and run that wheel back and forth several times, while dumping some fresh fluid in there and getting a little bit of air out of the line. So all those things, together, I think, it's much easier to just be focused and doing a little preseason maintenance checklist and just get it done, get it right, get out there, have fun fishing versus, have a fun day ruined because of a simple item that you forgot about, or potentially running with the Coast Guard that could just be a quick little check, pass, you're done, good. And then, otherwise you could end up with a ticket or something. And you mentioned something earlier that caught my attention. Speaking of the Coast Guard, what was it you said about the life jackets and the throwables that can actually dequalify them?
So every now and then I've seen it and I've had it happen to me before. If you've got a tear or a rip in a life jacket, one of the orange ones or, your throwable, sometimes Coast Guard, they'll just say, hey, replace that for us, because that's not technically intact. I haven't seen it recently, but and maybe that's because most of the equipment I'm dealing with is brand new off the shelf with the folks that we're delivering. But I know in my personal stuff, if I see a tear or something in one of those, I'll go ahead and just replace it and maybe just keep the spare one on board just in case, or a float for the kids or for a friend at the sandbar or something.
Amen to that. Well, Brad, I can't thank you enough for the insights and information to be thinking about for those boat owners out there. If folks want to get up with you over there at Oyster Cove and either pick your brain on maintenance, maybe schedule a future service, or potentially broker or buy a boat from you, what's the best way for them to get in touch with you?
One of the easiest ways to get a hold of us is with the office number. Office in Virginia Beach is 757-716-1819. You can always call or reach me on my cell, 910-367-2627. We're on all the social platforms as well. And man, I've enjoyed listening to the podcast. The first show got me all fired up. I'm getting jealous. Instead of getting everybody else's boat ready, instead of getting my boat ready, I'm helping get everybody else out on the water. So I'm jealous of these fishing reports right now.
Your day will come soon enough, man. You'll get tied on a good one here soon. I know you love chasing some goldfish out there in the bay, so hopefully you'll get on them soon. All right, folks, that's going to wrap it up this week. Please subscribe, rate, and review wherever you listen to podcasts. And remember, to get your free AFTCO Camo Sunglasses Cleaning Cloth, just text the acronym LCBFR to 779-345-2918 to get your promo code and be added to our email list so we can send you the new show each week. You guys keep whacking them and be safe out there.